Welcome to Master Your Merger, the podcast for leaders navigating the people side of mergers and acquisitions. Each week, your host Klint Kendrick talks with deal makers, HR leaders, and integration experts to uncover what really works when it comes to people, culture, and performance during a deal. From retaining top talent to aligning leadership, you'll hear real stories and actionable insights from the people doing the work, all designed to help you make your merger work. If you're leading through M&A, this is your weekly playbook.
Welcome to Master Your Merger, the podcast where we talk about what leads to successful mergers and acquisitions by putting people first. Today, we're discussing something that's essential in any deal, but especially critical for HR leaders: trust and credibility. Whether you're a seasoned HR executive or stepping into your first M&A deal, your ability to earn trust and maintain it can make or break your influence. But trust doesn't just show up because you have the title. It's built moment by moment, and it's especially hard to earn during times of change. Joining me today is Bob Sherwood, a seasoned global HR executive who has led HR teams through transformational change at companies like Givaudan, Citibank, PepsiCo, and more. Bob's also coached countless HR leaders and high potentials on what it really takes to be seen as a trusted advisor during M&A. Today, we'll explore how HR professionals can move from the day-to-day of business partnership into the high-stakes world of M&A and come out stronger, more credible, and more influential than ever. Bob, I'm thrilled to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Clint. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm glad to have you. Well, Bob, let's start off. You have a really amazing background in the HR space. Tell us a little bit about your career journey and the M&A work you've done.
Like many people of my vintage, I kind of fell into HR. And that's a story unto itself. So I started in HR basically as a compensation person, a regional bank here in Long Island. And then I went to Pepsi. And I really liked compensation. Pepsi assessed me and said, "What do you do in compensation?" And they threw me into recruiting. So as a comp person, I hated recruiters because they could never hire them in the range. And then I went into recruiting. I hated the comp people because it was so rigid. So that was really beneficial. And I've also worked in investment banking, property and casualty insurance, manufacturing. I really kind of proved the point that you have basic HR skills, you can work in any career. But you really have to learn and understand the business, and I can't say it enough.
Yeah. Well, and you've been in a lot of areas. I love how you point to the sort of functional clash that often happens inside of an HR department. But those seem like two really foundational skills for doing M&A work, right? You've got to have comp to work on the financial model. You have to understand how to attract people and want to make them work for you. So it seems like when you're working on change or M&A, those are really two very strong foundational skills.
Like I said, for me, it was all an accident, so I got lucky.
Well, so Bob, you've got a passion around trust and credibility. Why are those so important for HR leaders to have?
If you want to, I think the first person we have that develop your credibility is with the leadership, because what people say behind your back, you don't know. So they could be actually undermining you with the staff. We in HR are, I guess, we're like in a motorboat. The minute you shut that engine off, you sit still. So you're always pushing uphill. There's no coasting. And unless you understand what your business does, understand what the issues are, I thought, how do you help them? And if you can't help them, then you're relegated to some secondary role. And Steve and I talk about this. You might have mentioned too that so many HR people say, "Well, I have to have a seat at the table." When you go in and demand that, you do get a seat at the table, but it's a high chair.
Right.
And unless you're bringing something to the party, unless you show them something they haven't seen, let's say in this case, an acquisition, that they find that useful, and then we'll call you in. But also, very few people know how to relate with folks. So when I'd say the last company I was with, they did a lot of acquisitions. One was fairly big, is like 40% of the size of us.
Wow.
The rest of them was like small acquisitions because we'd rather buy than build.
Okay.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Sure.
And so as I used to deal with global, because Givaudan is a global company, my global colleagues, they were all about filling out the scorecard for McKinsey, and we have to get these things done. And you had to get the green light on your scorecard. The only thing people focus on is what 5 things we'll have to do with this little sheet to turn red green. It doesn't matter if it works, doesn't work. It gets in top. And one of the companies we acquired, I was with a colleague from overseas, and they had a lunch for us. And as we sat around the table, we would take a car back to the airport. And she said, "Oh, it's very good. People seem happy." I said, "You kidding me? Did you look in their eyes when you were around the table? They had smiles on their face, but these people are petrified. They're wondering, am I going to have a job? Or if I do have a job, am I going to like it? What's the future?" And very few people in HR can even answer that question.
Right.
It's more like, here's the policy manual. Here's you have this ticket, and nobody comes in. And so often I would go myself around the plant, let's say, and just talks to people and find out what's on your mind. And so often that they can tell you what could be done better.
Right. Well, it makes a ton of sense. So, you have to know the business, you have to understand the people side. And those seem really simple, but I don't see necessarily a lot of folks developing those skills intentionally, right? To your point, there's a lot of checklists, there's a lot of to-do lists, a lot of tasks, and the consultants often come in with handbooks that, tell you what to do, but not necessarily how to do it and how to get the most out of it. So, we started by talking about trust and credibility. It seems to me that those are 2 very important things, Bob, when a perspective like yours that says, hey, let's go pay attention to the people comes in. So how do you really go about building that with those business leaders? How do you demonstrate that you understand the business, you understand their goals, and maybe why they don't trust a checklist type approach from HR to meet those goals?
I'd probably start with, in this case, the company you acquire first. We had a company very similar. So we had similar products, but different names. And you have to say, as I'm going to go to them, so what's the difference between what you got and what we have? It's the same thing. And usually the higher you go, the least they can explain it.
Okay.
And the people, and we, in one of the companies, there was one guy, he was out of Europe, and our guy said, this guy is the crown jewel of the acquisition.
Okay.
So I went over to Holland and just wanted to look around and meet him. And I asked him, well, what's the difference between this product and that product? It's different names, but it does the same thing. He said, Bob, please, you would need a PhD and 25 years experience for me to explain that to you.
Okay.
So I came back and I said, I don't see this guy's a crown jewel. If he can't explain that to me, he probably doesn't understand it himself. Oh, no, you're wrong. 18 months, he was moved out of the company. And a lot of people are confused when HR asks a question like that.
Right.
And so many people got a scripted alone, including HR people. And we were having a problem in East New Jersey. And my HR guy at the time, he was a great actor. So he could read stuff, he played it back to you and say it was his emotions, his passion. He didn't know what the hell he was talking about.
Yeah.
And he was referring to equipment, and he had the pronunciation of the name wrong. So he had no credibility. But I found that if you can understand this stuff and you can point to a leader, say, did you see that over there? Is that equipment supposed to look that way? And then they come back and say, oh, we didn't notice that. But how often I've seen HR people do an acquisition, they get the plant tour.
Right.
They walk around, oh, God, nice, and then they head out. And again, the employees wonder, like, are they going around saying, keeping that guy, let's get rid of her, maybe so. And when you get them to the point where they will call you up and feel comfortable enough to say, hey, you were here. I didn't tell you this, but this is something in front of my colleagues. I don't want to say that, but this is something that I watch out for. And that certainly helped with getting on the people side, on the management sides. And a lot of HR people say, well, I've got to align myself with a manager because that's going to help my career.
Right.
And not really. I mean, I used to know all the nicknames of my HR people that they didn't even know. So we had one woman who the people calls her Molly Hatchet, because the only time you saw her was when somebody was getting fired.
Right.
And then I'm not, I could go on this, but at least the facts they would tell me that would be would be interesting. And in different way. Once in a while, I would go to a plant and take five of what I would call informal leaders. They weren't in charge of anything, but people went to them and say, "Hey, George, what do you think of this?" They're just, of course, they just understood, but they had no authority. And I took about five of them out to dinner once, pizza or beer, just to check in. So, was I sensed there was something wrong in the plan? When we left dinner, one guy said, I just want to thank you for did. I said, I didn't do anything yet. I'm just trying to learn. He said, I don't care if you don't do anything. You came here and you listened. That's all I want. It's that easy.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good point, though. So you've talked a bit about building that trust, not only with the management team, but also with the acquired employees. And I mean, it sounds to me like HR in our linking role, right? Putting the workforce and management together so that they're understanding what's going on from both sides. And that's a rough thing to do if you don't spend time with people on both sides of that equation.
And they have to see you as somebody who knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And during the union campaign, I had a meeting just like, what are you unhappy about? And they were talking about benefits and pay. And I said, no, I really wish rather than spend this time talking about pay and benefits, we could talk about solving the 42 quality problems in this site. The guy said, what do you mean quality problems? A major account of ours, a big beverage company, won't say which, but they had 92 quality complaints. And you have to understand, when you're dealing with a CPG company, the product being consistent and good is everything. It's not like, oh, well, we made it wrong, just send them a new batch. No, because I could have lost 100 customers because they went to a competitor because their stuff doesn't taste good. So I said, well, so I'd rather us spend the time on the tables. How do we fix these quality things? And then all of a sudden they start talking about what has to be done. And so really, the employees want to do a good job by and large.
Right.
And they didn't have information. They didn't know they had that many quality problems. After the meeting, one guy calls me up and said, you want to fix a quality problem? Take a look at your quality manager.
Oh.
And sure enough, he was taking shortcuts.
Yeah.
And letting product go out the door because she was getting pressured by the salespeople that we got to get this to the customer by Thursday. And yet, so wouldn't it be better to tell a customer, you're going to have it on Thursday, but you'll have it on Monday, but it'll be perfect? Or you can have it on Thursday, but I don't know, had the flavor profile I want. So many of the problems we had was dealing with the people. And they were the ones who could solve what the problems were because we wouldn't talk to them. I mean, so I was in the one plant in Connecticut, and I see a bunch of union guys. They were just hanging around. I said, guys looking busy today. I said, well, we can't they're putting in the conveyor belt over here. We had to stop. Said, but this is a mistake. What do you mean? I said, here's why this conveyor belt should be put there rather than here. Because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And I said, would you tell them? He said, oh, yeah, I did. I said, what'd they say? He said, what college did you get your degree from?
Wow.
And they said, well, I didn't, obviously I didn't go to university. He said, well, mind your business. 6 months later, they moved the conveyor belt where it's supposed to be. Now look at the time, the money, the fact that you kind of demotivated the workforce.
Right.
So, but that's sometimes when organizations are functionally organized, each one has goals and objectives. Sometimes they don't align with each other.
Right. When I think about my times working with workforces that are organized, have a union presence, often there is a really big us versus them, right? HR is sometimes perceived as the enemy. So it sounds like you've got this experience and this skill, Bob, of going into places where maybe it's not usually the friendliest environment and helping to connect people. So, what I've heard you say so far about how you do that is listen, understand the business, and I'm hearing curiosity in there as well. What are some of the other things that you have done that have really helped build trust, both with the workforce and with management?
So I just want to amplify that talking with people, the listening, that we tend to listen to answer a question. You should listen to learn.
Okay.
Because maybe you don't know what the answer is, but you know what? I'll find out. And people will feel that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can show them your SPHR. Also, you have to have a critical eye. You know, I think it was that famous philosopher Yogi Berra who said that you would be surprised what you could observe by watching. And sometimes you just have to look around and say, "Look, does everything look right to you?" It may or may not, but sometimes the untrained eye can spot a leak coming through a floor that somebody else may know. A lot of the war about that maintenance worries about that. But
No,
then
Bob,
it's how can you help solve their problems?
yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. I've been in HR for most of my career, and HR for HR I've done once. It's a fascinating job. HR people are a tough business group, and I think about the HR for HR folks that I've had, and the ones that I liked best did exactly what you talked about, right? They listened to understand what was going on in my world. The ones that I found it most challenging to work with were the ones where I said, "Hey, I think I need to redesign my org and I need to re-level some open positions," and I'm get the response, "Oh, you're fine." It's like, well, wait a minute. Do you even know why I think I need this? Do you understand my statement of work? Do you understand what's going on in my world with my team? And that complete lack of curiosity, of really even asking the questions, that really resonates with me, because those folks are the ones that honestly I stop calling, right? I just do what I need to do. And I know that as an HR person, I'm more likely to give them leeway because I've done that work before. I can't imagine a manager who's not got HR experience getting met with that kind of response, or an employee like, "Oh, you're fine. Don't worry about it." That really doesn't build trust. I don't want to go back to that person. So that makes a ton of sense. Have you ended up in a situation, Bob, where you've walked in, and I'm sure this has happened multiple times, where there wasn't a lot of trust, and you come in as a new HR leader and you've got to rebuild from the ground up? What did you do in that situation?
So in the part of my career where I was winding down and coming in for final approach, I get a call from report functionally to Europe. I reported to the head of HR in the flavor division where I was, and said, "Well, we'd like you. We got an assignment you could to deal with a cultural issue as a result of the acquisition, which was 3 years hence." Um, and then it's in Australia. I'm like, "Oh man, yeah, that's a long time away." He said, "This is going to take months. Forget it. I thank you." So I said, "Besides, you have an HR guy in charge of Asia. I mean, well." So she asked me a second time, and I said, "This really hasn't changed, because now we're heading into a holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas. I don't want to be, on the other side of the world." Later, the president came and he took me to dinner. He said, "Listen, I understand why you don't want to do this, because this is really inconvenient, and I just thought you could help with this, but it's not going to affect your career or increase turning it down. Don't worry." I said, "Well, I appreciate that. How much pain is that site giving you?" I said, "Oh my God, it's giving me a lot of pain. People are writing anonymous letters to the CEO.
Oof.
The numbers are wrong. The merger was a 50-50 merger down there. It's half of the size was ours and half the size was theirs." So I said, "If it's giving you a lot of pain," and I like this guy, I helped him get to that role. And I said, I'll go." I went down and I got lucky. The day I landed, the warehouse, the building next to the warehouse that I just went on fire.
Ooh.
Why am I lucky? Because everybody's under pressure. They didn't even see me, but now you see what they really are like.
Yeah.
So no, I went for a walk around. While I took care of the warehouse issue, I walked around the plant, and it was an extremely well engineered plant. I mean, it had that stuff that I wish we had. I mean, because it burnt down once before, and they really did it right. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with it, but really, first time I saw a forklift with copper coated forks. Why? Because when the forks hit the ground, it won't spark.
Ah, okay.
So I think,
Well, when you've had
that's
two
cool.
fires, not sparking is probably pretty important.
Um, I started talking to groups of people, and I went to the HR person and said, "See, what can I talk to the hourly people as a union plant?" But yeah, well, the best way to do that is go meet them by the fence over there where they go smoking. Well, all right, I'll go there. You got to find out who's who. What do you mean? They have a uniform. They couldn't decide if they're going to put one logo or the other logo on the uniform, so the uniform has nothing on it. So 3 years later, they don't know their name. Well, they don't like what the other one does. So again, where I got lucky. So I said, well, one thing about hourly people, anybody, you put food in front of them and they'll talk.
Yeah.
So I'm in this conference room. I didn't have the little thing switched to sit is occupied. And I'm talking, I'm beebling. They're just sitting there staring at me like, who's this? Who's he? He ain't coming down and telling us what to do. Well, one supervisor came in to get something in the closet. He said, oh, I'm sorry. I just want to get this. So he goes out. That 5 seconds later, he opens the door again. He said, hey, tell me something. Why, when you met with us, we had a bowl of candy on the table, and these guys get lunch? Well, it's simple. They do the work. You don't. Left in a huff, and the people, they started singing. Yeah. And they said, yeah, we do the work. Get out of here. The first thing that had to get fixed was the HR person had to go.
Yeah.
She was creating the cultural difference. And then the operations person, he was against growth. And then finance guy was okay. The head of commercial, who was kind of the lead for the group, this place has gotten too big for him and just overwhelmed him. And he was hot headed. He was short tempered, and he was working. So he was having frank conversations with these guys. So I had lunch with them once. I said, well, they obviously sent me down here. They don't spend that money. They want me to do something. What do you want on your corporate tombstone? You want, here lies Fred, who created a wonderful future for the company, or here lies Fred, who almost took the site down to his knees.
Right.
It's simple. Here's all the great things I did. And I said, Fred, that's not what I'm chiseling on your tombstone. And we also had to exit him.
Right.
If we treated him poorly, that would hurt the whole. Now, the inclination is it's a bad guy, let's stick it to him. It's about, don't go away, man, just go away.
Right.
A year later, I'm back home, and I get a call from the president who was down there visiting. He said, people are down here. He said, a year later, they're still talking about you. And he said, that's really good HR.
Yeah.
And because it made his problem go away. But again, some of the things started to slip back because the people I replaced him with didn't have that. They didn't leave the engine running full blast when in the boat. They turned it off for a bit. And they said, so, and cultures are like rubber bands. If you don't constantly keep the pressure on and stretch them, they go back to their original shape.
Right. Yeah. There's just so much in there. First, what I find interesting in the deals that I've done, I noticed that there is a real reluctance by some leaders to exit folks that are not aligned with the acquisition, right? They don't want to. And I think that's a good instinct, by the way, right? I think it's a good instinct to keep people employed, let them adjust, let them adapt, give them time for that change to take place. But there does come a point where they're no longer a team player, right? I mean, you said it had been a few years. So at that point, it seems like, a talent assessment or just looking at who's contributing, who isn't, it makes sense. But it feels like that ties really strongly back into trust, right? He trusted you, your leadership trusted you, you were able to go in and make that difference, even in a hard action like letting people go. What do you think built up to that, Bob, that really gave you that? Like if you were mentoring a new person in the M&A space about how they needed to show up to build that trust so that their recommendations could be followed through on, what are some of the things that you would tell them to go do at the beginning?
Well, they have to change their mindset,
okay,
and they have to think about, how can I make a difference? I want to fix what's wrong with these people, and they really didn't know how. You got to spend the time. It doesn't happen where, okay, I took a bunch of lunch, I went around the plant, I got trust. Employees do two things. They watch and they count. You're saying what you want, but they're walking around, and it takes courage and some interpersonal agility. You got to be able to take a hit. It's kind of like Rocky. It's not how hard I hit. It's how hard I can take a punch.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have the people say things negative about you, and you got to come back and, like Rocky, you got to stand up and say, is that the best you got? Besides being intellectually curious, you have to be a good teacher.
Okay.
But sometimes people work for a company 30 years and they still don't know what makes the place tick. They just, my job is for this and there. And I was going around one plant, and it was like looking at people that were working at the Manhattan Project. They all had a piece of it, but they didn't know how to fit into it. And the leadership didn't either. The president was in town, and he said, hey, here's what I can do for you. I said, yeah, could you give like a speech to the plant? I wasn't thorough in explaining to them. I said, you got to explain to these people that this thing you're making here goes into a flavor in Japan. This one here goes to the flavor in Argentina, because that plant was a center of excellence for vanilla. And instead, he went up and took out an old presentation at a board meeting, and it was at EBITDA, and it was about like for like basis, and you could see him like falling asleep.
Right.
And the only thing they thought was good is I got out of work for an hour. And so the head of the division, because he was too focused on commercial, he was too focused on getting numbers, and you had to spend some time with the folks. When I first came to Givaudan was much smaller. The HR person for Latin America resigned, and he was basically the region head's like bag man. Go to the airport, get the car, and it just kind of doing little things. And he thought that was good. And so my boss, who said, it's region too small. You run Latin America from the States. So the head of the region said, listen, this is a mistake. I don't really want you in this job because you don't speak Spanish. You don't speak Portuguese. You only go down here like several times a year. It's not going to be effective. And again, I won't have my partner to carry my bags in between flights. So I said, look, you can hate me all you want, but I didn't ask for this job. My boss put me here. So you want to talk to him? That's fine. So every time I went down there, I spent a day longer, and I would speak to 10 to 14 people.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of when I was on the long flight home, I would handwrite notes to each one of them.
Oh, wow.
And I try to remember something, because they were painful. They're trying to speak English, and I'm trying to understand. So I did what I could. I kind of followed what Mick Jagger does, Not that he speaks these languages, but he speaks 1 or 2 sentences perfectly at the opening of the concert. And the audience goes wild, and then he sings all in English. And over a year, we had dinner, and this guy said, I don't understand something. You only head down here about 8 or 9 times a year at each site. And people keep on saying, when's Bob coming back?
Yeah.
How do you do that? You don't speak the language. And again, it was just talking and listening. And then crafting these notes that said something good. Now, that kind of works against you sometimes, because once a new head of division came in and he knew how Latin America, he said, hey, listen, I'm having dinner with the marketing staff. Do you want to come join us? Yeah, I had nothing to do. So he said, I wanted to introduce Bob. And one woman says, you remember me? I said, I'm going to embarrass myself now, but I said, you were down 5 years ago, and you wrote me this note. And I still have this note in my desk. And when I feel it's a bad day, I go to reread your note. The guy who ran that area never invited me to dinner again. But we're still, to this day, we're good friends. As a matter of fact, I'm going to a retirement party next month. But it's sometimes you do stuff like that. It was very, very hard writing these notes. And it'd be cursive, which nobody does anymore. But I say one thing: you could write somebody a note on email, and it's read and deleted. You handwrite something, they keep it.
Yeah, especially these days. That's definitely a very rare show of attention and care. Bob, when I think about listening in M&A, we usually talk about things like focus groups. We talk about surveys. But I love the fact that you're emphasizing what one of my old mentors called management by walking around. Really taking a look at the site. And when I think about listening, like the focus groups, like the surveys, we talk about this survey fatigue that happens, and all the research that we've got out there says that it's not really survey fatigue, it's lack of reaction to the survey, right? You've asked me my opinion in the survey or the focus group, and then you do nothing. And what I hear you saying is that, you did that listening by walking around, and then you followed up, right? You let people know that you heard them, that you appreciated their feedback. And I mean, what a phenomenal way to do things without needing to go through the challenges of a survey, without the organization of a focus group. Now, I still think those are great tools, but I think that nothing replaces that high touch one-on-one contact when you can make it happen.
And they're good tools, but I will stuff. If a good HR person doesn't know the answers to the survey questions, then they're not there. We spent millions of dollars with some companies like Gartner, and they slice this up 6 ways. But the point you made is a valid one. What changed? And a lot of times they don't feel you can even trust the survey.
Right.
Because they ask questions, well, are you thinking of leaving your job in 12 months? I'm not going to tell you the truth.
Right.
I'm interviewing right now. They say it's anonymous, but we all know you can, and they are not. I
Yes.
believe that they're not anything, but you can trace the stuff back if you want. So, and I think it's doing, there's also a problem with surveys is they give you a laundry list of things that has to get done, which is overwhelming.
Right.
And then ranging from changing a configuration of a plant to can I have cheaper food in the cafeteria. So each day, if you have an opportunity to change one thing, do it. I walked in a plant once, and yeah, these stand-on forklifts. You see them in Home
Oh, yeah.
Depot. Well, usually in the old ones, we had a little arrow on your forklift that tells you what angle the rear wheel is at.
Okay.
Well, this it was an old machine, and this thing was broken. So I see a guy on his hands and knees looking underneath the forklift and directing the driver of the forklift to the left or to the right. I walked over and said, "What are you doing?" So if I don't do this, he could wreck the rack. And it's so once you get that fixed, I said, "Well, it's too old. They don't have parts for it anymore." Well, then get a new one. We asked them now for months, and we haven't seen a new one yet. I go into the plant manager's office and said, "Once you get these guys a forklift, I mean, we're the richest company in this industry. We can't afford a forklift. It's not me. It's purchasing because they have to get 3 beds and have." So I know the purchasing guy. I went over. I said, "Hey, let's have a cup of coffee." So I go down to the plant. I said, "What do you think of that?" And he sees the guy in the hands and he said, "Oh, that's terrible." I said, "You know that's because of you." "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you are making customers fill out a 20-page questionnaire whether or not we're going to use them or not. Somebody get hurt."
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I can get a loaner here in 24 hours. Why don't you do that?
Yeah.
3 weeks later, I'm taking a shortcut to the plant, and 2 of the guys said, "Oh, you got a minute?" I said, "Yeah, look over there." I said, "What?" I said, "You see anybody in your hands and knees?" I said, "No." I said, "We thank you." I said, "I don't run this plant." I know. I said, "No, no, but you came and got done."
Yeah.
And then, and that was in Cincinnati. This stuff, I don't know how it happens. It travels from plant to plant.
Yeah.
I was in New Jersey once, and somebody put a post-it sticker on the HR doors, and the second shift is one to meet with me. All right. So their break was 11 o'clock at night. And I said, "Okay, what's on your mind?" And I thought it was going to be the supervisor. So this guy's doing that, and somebody's saying, it sounds for about 30 seconds. And it's the barrel filter. "Okay, what's a barrel filter?" And this other explain, says, can you take me back? I just want to see what this thing does. And they showed me what it's broken with. So we go back. "Is there anything else bothering you?" I said, "No." I said, "Why are you telling me? I mean, I'm not in maintenance. I'm not responsible for the plan. What do you think I could do?" I said, "Oh, we're told you'll get it fixed."
You got a reputation, Bob.
And it's a hard one to keep up to because now you're sticking your nose in manufacturing guy. And they also had wires sticking out. And somebody said, so-and-so got a shock in there. But boy, the company electrician came in and he didn't have a uniform jacket. He had a jacket with the name of his electrical company at back, but he's on our payroll.
Oh.
So I thought, what's wrong? And somebody said that they got a shock from this thing. Wrong, must be static electricity. Is that from the rug they're working on or from the rubber shoes they have? How'd they get that static shock?
Right.
It's not because electricity. "No, come on, put on your gun." I put on mine. It was wintertime. He said, "Where are we going?" I said, "I know it." I said, "Well, I know you know it, but I want to stick your hand on the wire and see if it's static or not." Both I was fixed.
Yeah.
The most flattering thing I heard when I did the victory lap before I retired, that same plant, 2 mechanics came out and said, "We heard you're retiring. Who's going to watch out for us?" I said, "Listen, I'm in Cincinnati. You have an HR person in the plant. He reports to an HR person. I mean, you've got a lot of HR support here. Yeah, but they'll look out for us." Went through 9 union campaigns and I won them all. And after I left, that site became unionized.
I think about the union campaigns that I've experienced in my career, and usually it's because that trust is missing. Just to bring this full circle, right? The employees don't trust management. They don't feel heard. They don't feel listened to. So it surprised me, Bob, that you come in, you build this trust, right? You get things done, and people have an advocate. The workforce has an advocate with you as their HR leader. And when that advocacy goes away, then they're going to look for somebody to advocate for them with the company. And, in that case, it was turning to a union to help advocate for their position. I think it demonstrates the kind of difference that having a strong HR person in an organization can make for helping people feel heard and and really respected on the job. That's one of the other things that I kind of keep hearing as an underlying thread to what you're saying is you didn't just listen, you respected their expertise, you respected their opinions, you respected their personhood. And I think that's something that a lot of times corporate leaders really miss anytime, but especially in M&A when they come in like the conqueror, right? We're going to make this right. We're going to fix this, even though they bought the company because it's successful. Bob, as we look to wrap up, I want to come back to the conversation that we had at the very beginning, where you said a lot of times HR people demand that seat at the table, but because it comes from a demand, that seat is often a high chair. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about, how do you get that seat at the table and it not be the high chair, that it not be a demand because you're whining and screaming for it, but that it's really a place where you're invited to be a peer?
It's having as much knowledge about the business where the people around the table who are business leaders will kind of say, yeah, we better listen to them. A lot of these guys don't like me when I walk around and talk to their people because I may uncover something. And I always felt there's some operations guys who didn't want me to plant unless I told them a day in advance. And I said, I'm the HR guy. This company is mine. I'm going to walk anywhere I want. These are my constituents,
Right.
So, and a lot of times sometimes you walk around, and I'm a gearhead. And one guy had a picture of, I think it was a 64 Impala on his bench. And I said, wow, look, and we started talking about the car for about 10 minutes. And word got back to the plant manager. This guy got called into the office. What did you talk about? He said, well, we're talking about the car. I can't be. He was talking about something in the plant. I said, no. He said, we're talking about cars. I knew enough about cars so this guy could respect me.
Yeah.
I think when you go into these meetings and you have to be able to do combat and not do it like, because I'm HR, operations was doing a bad job. Plant manager gets the head of operations up and says, the problem we're doing a good set of management meeting is that we don't have enough HR people. And I said, God, I was thinking of something, but in a different way. The reason you need more HR people is you need better managers. Mm-hmm. If you had better managers, I need less HR staff. If you had better managers, I wouldn't even be here. So I think we'll have to start teaching the leadership on how to really deal with people.
Well, Bob, those are definitely fantastic stories. And I think they teach a great lesson about building trust. So what I've heard today is understand the business, listen to the people. When you make promises, keep them. Those are just some of the really foundational things that I've heard today. Bob, thank you so much for the generosity with the time, with sharing your experience. And we'll make sure that we have a LinkedIn connection and another way for folks to reach you if they want to reach out. Thank you again.
Anything I can do to help, I'm here for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Merger, hosted by Klint Kendrick. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this valuable, share it with someone leading through a deal. To explore toolkits, resources, and upcoming programs, including our free roundtables, visit masteryourmerger.com. We'll see you next time.